So in Nome, we were asked to see if we could use this technology to help make maps of the ice that they were going to have to bring the hoses across from the ship to shore. The ship was potentially not going to get any closer to a mile from the coastline, and it wound up being about half a mile from the causeway that stuck out, butted out from the coast. And so they've never had done a fuel transfer in the United States across sea ice. So they were going to have to drag hoses across the ice, which had buckled and ridged and under a lot of pressure and had cracks and moves. And so they were asking for maps of that so they could understand the dynamics of it, the hazards they may be incurring. That was one of the jobs. Another task we took on while we were there was, as they were trying to go out on the ice, the Coast Guard in particular, the officer would go out on the ice and look around. Instead of having to take a team of people with them as they're planning how they're going to deal with getting the hoses across the ice and how they had to smooth the ice out to get across the ice, we'd fly before we'd go out there. Then he'd go out and look around, and we'd fly where he'd been, we'd watch him while he's doing his research, and then we'd be able to come back to the city hall, and he could share what he saw with 20, 30 people at a time, show video, show photographs we'd taken, and he could describe what went on out there without having to bring everybody on the ice. So they could make their plans in the conference room at City Hall rather than out on the ice itself, which was convenient as well as safe. And then the third thing we did was try to take imagery of the area when Narinda arrived so that we could help the public affairs officer get information, be able to share with the press what was going on and what had been happening, what was going on as the ships arrived in port and how they arrived in port, just so they had more information. This was an international story at this point, and it had a lot of demand for information from it. That's what's unique about Alaska is we have real missions. This technology is demonstrated to be safer and is, in some cases, the only way to get the data. And, oh, by the way, we also have very little air traffic, provided you don't fly around some of the cities where the airplanes, all the airplanes that are in the state congregate, like Anchorage and Fairbanks and Juneau. As this technology is coming out of the military and getting opened into the commercial sector, I hope to see it just identify all kinds of new projects, new problems to solve that they've never thought of this before. I want to see the hardware get lower in cost so it can be more readily accessible. I want to make sure it doesn't threaten my flight home this afternoon. We're on Alaska Airlines. I want to make sure it's safe, other airplanes are safe. In fact, I think some of the technology being developed in the unmanned aircraft community will ultimately bleed back into the manned aircraft community and make manned aircraft flying safer. Like, how do you automatically see other airplanes? How can you do that in bad weather or in dark skies and things like that? Because pilots always aren't the best at looking at the cockpit and looking for other airplanes. So I think there's technology that we're developing in the unmanned community that was going to help manned aviation improve their own safety. There's humanitarian missions that we've had discussions with overseas where when the technology gets low enough in cost and reliable enough or easy enough to operate that boat deckhands, fishermen can fly them. Cattle ranchers in Africa can actually maintain their herds and monitor their herds against thieves. All kinds of interesting missions out there, but you can't do it with the airplanes when they're costing what they cost today, or they take weeks to learn to fly and they're very fragile. You need the robustness, and that's only going to come with increased exposure and increased opportunities. But it's coming, and it won't be that far off.